Alright guys, let's talk about this most recent episode of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 5. At this point, I think even the most optimistic fans of the show would admit that this is a nail in the coffin for the series, that this season has been a total dumpster fire in terms of writing. The writing has been truly abysmal, and it's kind of ruined the series for everyone. I think for me, one of the most frustrating things is how Season 8 has completely ruined some of the earlier seasons of the show. It's going to be really hard to go back and watch some of these earlier seasons knowing that this is how the story ends. It's going to be hard listening to characters talk about the Night King and the long night that's going to last years, when in actuality it just abruptly ends without ever finding out the motivations behind the Night King. Most painfully is going to be watching these long character arcs that had been patiently nurtured and set up only for them to completely fall apart in the later seasons in a couple of episodes. I recently watched the trailer for the behind the scenes documentary of the show, and I couldn't help but feel so sorry for some of these people that have spent years of their lives and poured their heart and soul into this project, only for their great work to be overshadowed by terrible writing and a rushed storyline.
I can't even begin to imagine how this is going to look on TV.
Here we go. Been doing night shoots. I'm broken.
I could not have worked harder. I really have given this everything I have.
It's such a magical place.
It's hard to say goodbye to everybody.
That was Amelia's last shot on Game of Thrones.
This is a dream job, a director. This show saved my life.
It's hard to fathom that I'll never be coming back. Best thing I've ever done.
I'm not even gonna lie, that is hard to watch. That director saying how this show has saved his life and these other people talking about it with such passion, and it's all undone because of their writers. It's tough. It really is tough. But enough about that. Let's get into the episode. I think one of my biggest problems with this episode and the last few seasons has been a lack of consistency, or what I like to call selective realism. And this is especially front and center in this episode. We're just coming off episode 4 where Rhaegal had been sniped not once, not twice, but 3 straight times from hundreds of meters away by Euron and his Iron Fleet. So with more ships and one less dragon, surely Daenerys has to do something different. Wrong. Just does the exact same thing that she avoided in the last episode, but this time, because of plot armor, it works out. Like, I wish I was kidding about this. Episode 4, Daenerys goes in, tries to dive bomb the Iron Fleet, thinks, you know what, maybe this is a bit too impulsive, I better not do this. The very next episode does the exact same thing against even more ships. Like, just the writers, what are you doing? What are you doing? I think one of the only silver linings for this season has been the entertainment I've got from watching these really elaborate fan predictions about the episodes, only for the writers to turn around and pick the stupidest possible solution to some of these problems. I remember watching the trailer for episode 5 and then going on to watch some of the elaborate fan predictions for the show. Some of them were, oh, Daenerys has extra dragons that she's been secretly hiding, or, oh, she's armored up Drogon, or what I thought was that Drogon would be dropping, I don't know, wildfire bombs from high altitude. But the writers of the show just decided, no, you know what, we're just gonna buff the shit out of Drogon, nerf the absolute shit out of the Scorpions. Another thing that really pisses me off about this scene is, why is it that only Euron's ship is shooting at Drogon? None of the other ships are just doing anything, just sitting there AFK the entire time, getting torn apart. Another thing that really dawned on me from Varys' death scene is that if Drogon is this level 9000 stealth god, why doesn't Daenerys just attack the Iron Fleet at night? Like, she could absolutely decimate them at night without even risking anything. It just The tacticians in the Game of Thrones Westeros are terrible. Everyone fights outside of castles, doesn't use castle walls. It's just terrible. But enough about me ranting about scorpions and drogons. Let's move on to my next issue with this episode, which is Euron. Euron has to be the stupidest character in all of Game of Thrones. Nobody understands his motivation. Why on earth does he fight Jaime Lannister? I honestly just felt like the writers did it so that Jaime fighting his way back to Cersei would be more intense and it would be more impactful. But it was just the most baffling scene. Just no motivation behind it. Just two guys just decided to fight. Completely stupid. But all of these gripes are so small in comparison to the absolute assassination of some of the most well thought out and long character arcs of the show. Jaime Lannister, Daenerys, and I'd even say Arya Stark. I could rant about these character arc failures for such a long time, but I'm going to just briefly go over them. With Jaime Lannister, we got 7 seasons of the redemption storyline. We saw Jaime Lannister in season 1, a complete douchebag, but then over time, very incrementally rebuilds himself into this redemption storyline, all for it to just come crashing apart in this episode. It's just terrible. Jaime's storyline ends with him doing a complete 180 to what we are building up for 7 seasons and just going back to Cersei and confessing his love. Yeah, that's it. That's what the writers came up with. And then moving on to Daenerys. I don't have a problem with Daenerys becoming the Mad Queen. It was how poorly it was executed. If this was something that was set up over the entire season, like, I could be fine with it. But for someone that was so patient when winning over the people of Meereen, for her to just flip a switch just because people don't love her in Westeros when she spent like a couple of months there, it just seems ridiculous. It really does just seem ridiculous. And then moving on to a character arc that I feel like not a lot of people are talking about, which is Arya Stark. I feel like for a couple seasons now, they've kind of butchered Arya's storyline. They've turned her into quite a one-dimensional character, just really an assassin with no emotions. I personally always felt that with Arya Stark, on top of the storyline of seeking revenge, Arya was always about these situations where she was powerless and trying to become someone that wasn't put in these situations anymore. Like, if you think back to the first season, when she literally had to watch her dad get executed in front of her without being able to do anything. And then moving on to Yoren, where she was powerless to help Yoren. Her and Gendry just had to watch from the bushes. And then, of course, we had the Red Wedding, where she was too late and still couldn't help her brother or mom. And then even in Bravos, she couldn't help Lady Crane from getting assassinated. So with Arya, I've always felt that on top of this revenge storyline, there was this element of she's becoming someone that isn't powerless in these situations. Which finally brings us back to episode 5, which I thought was a bit of a letdown. I actually liked the moment between Arya and the Hound. I thought that was a great scene. It addressed the revenge storyline really well. But ultimately, I was disappointed in how they decided to go with Arya's storyline. I'm not saying that Arya had to kill Cersei, but the thing to remember is that this is someone that's been reciting the names of the people that she wants to kill, and Cersei being like one of the top names on that list. And also the significance of this is the first time Arya's back in King's Landing since Ned's death that set off these chain of events. So I think to end that storyline without Arya even confronting Cersei is like a big miss from the writers of the show. And for Arya to get so close to literally be inside the Red Keep and then just completely turn around, it kind of just came out of nowhere, to be honest. It was against the grain of what had been set up in the previous seasons of the show. When I was watching it live, I couldn't help but think of the scene from Forrest Gump where he's literally been running across the entire country, and then in the middle of the desert he just stops, says, "I'm tired and I'm going home." That's all I could think of when I saw that scene. For me, it just didn't make any sense.
I had run for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days and 16 hours.
Quiet, quiet, he's gonna say something.
I'm pretty tired. Think I'll go home now.
Now what are we supposed to do?
So those are my thoughts on Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 5. We've got one episode left, but I'd say altogether it's been a pretty disappointing end to what has been a great show. But I want to know your thoughts. How do you think the writers have done in terms of wrapping up some of these character arcs? Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you've enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thanks.